Hi. Oh, I don't know if we were supposed to have a countdown, but it looks like
We
we're
should
not
have, but we're just live.
today. So,
Hello.
we usually have a countdown, but because I'm in charge, Jerome's not here. We didn't get one.
Well, let's just sit quietly for
Ready?
30
Okay.
seconds.
30, 29, 28, 27, 26, and
Fast forward 10,
more.
9.
3, 2, 1.
Uh,
Fast
Before we get started, we are covering our core competencies number 3 and 4 today. To those of you watching out there, we would love to hear from you. Go ahead, leave whatever you need, questions you may have, join in the conversation in the comments. And also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like button and all of that good stuff. It's the only way we know that we are doing a good job. So also, hi to 102 students who are watching. Hello. I hope your class is going or is going to be soon, and I hope you're excited. So this will be used for content for our 102 as well. So, all right, let's get moving in, shall we? Let's dive right in. Core competencies. One of the just so you know, we're going to go over them. We're going to dive in. We will quickly highlight the differences between ACC, PCC, and MCC, but we're not going to live in that space. That'll be a very quick note in any of these. And then we're going to go through each sub competency on the core competencies. So beginning number 3. Anthony, do you want to read number 3?
Also, for those of you who watched our last video, we were on section A, the foundation. We moved past that now, and we're moving on to section B, which is focusing on co-creating the relationship. So you need that foundational aspect before you can even begin co-creating that relationship. But we'll be moving on to core competency 3, establishes and maintains agreements. So that's defined as partners with the client and relevant stakeholders to create clear agreements about the coaching relationship, process, plans, and goals. Establishes agreements for overall coaching engagement as well as those for each coaching session. So it's all about just what did we agree to? What are we talking about in terms of the coaching session agreement and the entire coaching program agreement, whatever that might look like, doing a 10 session or maybe a one-off. But we'll dive into the sub-competency now. Number 1, explains what coaching is and is not, and describes the process to the client and relevant stakeholders. Do you guys find that a lot of new clients know what coaching is right off the bat?
No.
Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think even students aren't really sure what it is until they come in.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I know I didn't.
Some of them might be, maybe, but no.
So what do people tend to think coaching is, but it's really not? What are their first sort of preconceived notions about it?
I'm going to give you all my expertise and advice in 3 sentences. I tell you to jump and you ask me how high.
Right. And then I think people, have a background in something else like sports or fitness. So I think people, the first thing they see with me, it's like, oh, what sport do you coach? Or coach? Oh, okay. Well, I see, you work out. You're going to tell me, just like Misha said, you're going to tell me what to do. So I think that's the biggest misconception. You hear coaching, and naturally, if you don't know what it is, you're going to relate it to what you know about the word. And so it's like someone who's going to give me the playbook, and I do it.
Yeah. And Steve just said, imagine they think it's therapy. Some people think it's therapy. Yep, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Or, yeah, a cheap replacement for therapy.
The non-covered by insurance thing.
Mm-hmm. Which it's not.
Right.
Not yet.
But that's part of this competency, is that you going into this, before anything's written down on paper and signed, people have to understand what it is they're agreeing to and what is not included in the contract. So that way, if for some reason the client ever wants to go beyond the scope of coaching, you can say, well, what we agreed to when we maintain our agreements per our contract, per what me and the stakeholder agreed to, or me and the sponsor agreed to, that's not coaching. So let's try to keep it within the coaching space. It's probably a better way in the coaching session to redirect that flow.
What's interesting too, it was mentioned in the ICF video, which I will attempt to pop in there for you guys as well. For anybody watching, pop in our comments. I may not be able to right away, but at least after the video, we will be able to get those in there. So they mentioned that they don't want you to just read the ICF definition of what coaching is and is not. They want you to be sort of being able to express it in your own words. And that is something that they look for in this for sure. So
we move on to number 2 then?
Let's do it.
And then I'll talk a little less. Reaches agreement about what is and what is not appropriate in the relationship, coaching relationship, what is and what is not being offered, and the responsibilities of the client and relevant stakeholders. So the clients do have responsibilities, but what are those responsibilities?
I think this is a bridge off of that first part, right? Where they're not sure. And that's part of us telling them what that is, the education on our part. So that's letting them know who is in charge, right, of this action and the accountability. And then also making it known from the start, once you said, now this is, let's establish what coaching is and what it's not. So now you don't have to worry about that, because before you agreed and before we started this coach-client relationship, you already knew up front what it was and what it's not. So I think the biggest part is discussing that up front so anyone understands. And it helps coaches as well. It keeps you out of that place of liability because, oh, well, you didn't tell me that. Yes. Yeah, we went over that.
That was number 2, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Number 2. Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Yep.
We're, by the way, we're looking at the sub competencies, which you can find on the ICF core competency page. I'm going to pop that link in there.
Yeah.
Right.
This is all part of maintaining.
It's part of this number 3, establishing. And I think all of this kind of is fairly straightforward in this, but I think that also dovetails right into our next one. Is there anything else we want to cover in 2?
Well, I think that in this process, we want to highlight that on the exams, from what we've been told from some of us that have taken it, that stakeholder process is also a big highlight in there, that we want to acknowledge that relationship with that coaching agreement and contract on those standards, on what that means and what it doesn't mean.
Mm-hmm.
I also think if you want to know more, because I know there's a lot of questions around this sort of thing in the exam and in other things, what like the stakeholders and coaching with sponsors. And so we do have a video. And if you go to our YouTube channel and you go to the ICF 101 playlist, within that playlist of videos, there is definitely information on coaching with sponsors and stakeholders and how that works and all of that. As well.
Code of ethics as well is a good place to find out what is and is not appropriate in a coaching relationship. It doesn't really define it here.
Absolutely.
But let's go into number 3. Reaches agreement about the guidelines and specific parameters of the coaching relationship, such as logistics, fees, scheduling, duration, termination, confidentiality, and inclusion of others. So the brass and tacks, so to speak, of coaching.
I think that a lot of people who are in the coaching profession can avoid a lot of headaches when you put all of this in your agreement, your actual contract, like from the beginning, what is coaching, what is not coaching, what is appropriate in the relationship, what's being offered, what's not being offered. And number 3, I mean, when are you going to be having your appointments, or how are you scheduling your appointments? Are you using a Google Calendar link or whatever? I think all of that, if you have it in your agreement and you go over it during your very first intake session with your clients, you're going to avoid a lot of problems. And you're going to be following the core competencies, which, woohoo!
I'm so glad you said and go over it too, because I think that's such a critical part of this is remembering not to just assume that your client has read and understood everything, even if they signed it. Just making sure we really just give them, get a verbal confirmation as well as that written confirmation of just what is going to happen within the session. So there's that clear understanding.
And I'm gonna be, Troy always says I'm spicy. Okay. So all of you watching on Facebook, some of you know when you come into your 3-day class for 101 and 102, you have not read everything. You signed it, but you didn't read everything because we repeat ourselves over and over again. Doesn't mean we don't love you, but start reading things yourselves, because you know what? If you're not reading things and your clients aren't reading things, you're gonna have some issues. Start reading before you sign.
And I'm the one who wrote those, so I've inserted some crazy things in there.
Anthony's like, please make sure you read it.
Yes.
It's just gonna be karma. Karma's gonna hit you in the butt. You're gonna get a client and they, I'm just saying.
What is our running joke in the office? Adults don't read. Like we just have like so many examples of it.
Yes. All your answers are found in the contract. And also, I mean, if you don't do this, there's going to come a time where it's like, oh, I wish I would have included this in the contract. It's always happened. So just do it all at the beginning.
It just really clarifies and identifies who you are, who you're not, what those fees are going to be, what they're not going to be, what you're willing to do as a coach, what they've got to do as a client. I mean, it's just really going to set the standard of what that expectation is in your coaching session.
Steve writes, people should read, you can sign away the right to your firstborn. That is in our coaching agreements for CLCI.
No. Ours is the first million. You have to give us your first million.
I think too, just one of the things to know as that I've learned in having contracts and everything is your contracts are probably going to start in one place and you're going to think, yeah, this is exactly how I want things. But you'll probably have experiences along the way that make you flex into new spaces in that contract.
Oh, yeah.
Learning spaces. I think a lot of us start with a much more liberal refund policy and reschedule policy, and as we learn that
become more conservative,
shrinks,
rigid as you go along.
Yes,
and that's okay, right? We learn and it changes and flexes, and then anytime that you're going to change that or revise your agreement, we need to of course go over that again with our clients in writing and make sure they are aware of what is happening. So
agreement to that conflict, right? You usually narrow it down because you don't want to get into resentment. You're setting boundaries and you want to live up to those boundaries.
Yes.
Let's
all
go
right.
into
Up
number
next.
4. Yeah. Partners with the client and relevant stakeholders to establish an overall coaching plan and goals.
Communication.
From the beginning.
Communication. What are we here for? What do you want? What is the timeline that you foresee? And let's go from there. But I think that one is cut and simple communication. And stakeholders too, for people watching too. That's people who are involved with the process as well. I.e., for me as a youth coach, a lot of times that's parents, counselors, coaches, whoever is paying for the service. So it's just making sure that you have everything set up in the beginning in terms of communication and who the coaching service is for. And that I think goes into that overall plan and goals and everything like that. And they can change once you start the relationship, but clear communication up front.
I'm glad you said that. I was just going to say, and they can change. And that's when, you set it up in one way. And as things start to evolve and things change, then you just let the stakeholders know, I just like Mike, I work with kids. And so, I will communicate with the parents and say, you know what, we've had a reevaluation of what's important right now and want to check in with you all, make sure that's okay. I also have had times where I've been an organizational coach where someone's brought me in to work with their CEOs. And I didn't have to share everything, but I definitely had to keep those higher ups informed as to what me and what the client and I are working on. But it's important from the beginning to establish at least whatever your initial plan is, with the caveat that, hey, things will change.
Mm-hmm.
And as always, goals, if you take our class, should be smart. So,
Smarter.
Smarter.
Don't you forget.
That's important.
Don't forget.
Let's go ahead and move to the. I'm keeping an eye on time. We're not doing too bad for time, but
Yeah, we're good.
anything else in that space? I think it's pretty straightforward. We really cover that goals in our 101. So let's move to the next one. This next one I think is a little interesting.
Partners with the client to determine client-coach compatibility. So that brings an interesting topic to mind. Not every client is compatible with every coach and vice versa. And you might find out later into the coaching relationship rather than sooner. So that's something a coach always has to keep in mind.
You don't like me? What?
So I have a question in this space.
Yeah, because I think it's just not more than just that too. Yeah, go ahead.
You get into a coaching relationship, and you as the coach, for whatever reason, and this has happened to me, feel like maybe I'm not the best person to serve this client.
Yeah.
It is our duty, it is our responsibility to be transparent about that, correct?
Yes. According to our ethics.
Absolutely.
Our ethics,
Totally.
yes, tell us to.
Well, I would caution, I mean, you don't have to share all the reasons why you're not compatible.
Right.
Correct.
But definitely finding a diplomatic way of allowing them to know that you don't feel like you're best to serve them.
Yeah, and that can be for
practice is a good term to get used to saying beyond my scope of practice.
Beyond my
scope of practice. I used that one time that it didn't go well. They were mad at me that I would not work with them when I already explained that to them, that this is beyond my scope of practice. This is not something I can work with. They were very upset with me. Brooke and I kind of interrupted. Go ahead, Brooke.
Oh yeah, no, they can. Also, though, I think that there have been times, especially with newer coaches, where there can be a moment of insecurity where you think, I am not good enough to work with this client. And I've heard coaches and had coaches share this where they were like, I just didn't feel like I was the best coach for them, but their client is content with them. And we're not talking about a situation where we're referring out, but a situation where that coach is sort of insecure, and it's an interesting space to be in. And I would just be transparent, right, as we had said, but also be willing to have that discussion and see what that client really wants.
Yeah, the important part of this, it says partners with the client to determine.
Yep.
So that's a two-person, multiple-person process, not just the coach trying to figure out in their own head, oh, maybe I'm not worthwhile, maybe I'm not a good coach. Have a discussion with the client, see how they are enjoying the coaching process and if they are meeting their goals.
The other piece too that I think that we're not thinking of, we're taking this very literally or very like big picture-y, but I think in a smaller realm, this can how do we work together as a coach and a client? So what works for you? What works for you in this coaching space? How are we working together compatibly? And it doesn't have to be this either we are, working together, or we aren't, but it can be something where you establish with your client, when I have an observation, how would you like me to share that with you?
Right.
How would you like me to bring that up with you? And I think that this is when we're getting into a more nuanced space of compatibility, but it's actually us being curious and learning what's going to work for our clients so we can be compatible with them and work compatibly together. So I don't think we have to take it to this big, either we're great together or we aren't together, but we can bring it back to a smaller, more, little bit piece space where we're asking our clients, what makes us compatible? What will make this experience something that works for you in the little things that we do within the coaching space? And I think it's something that can keep happening throughout. And it's something that if we remain curious as a coach and curious about what works for our clients so that we can remain compatible and make the space one that is compatible with them. And I think this comes up again, but I think this is a first introduction, and it's an introduction in a way that we're establishing, okay, what works for you in this space? Because it's going to be different for different people.
Yep.
Well, it's also about not making assumptions. I mean, everybody in 101 knows, like, they walk in with sunglasses. We don't need to do anything about that, right? So how do you sit with yourself as a coach and allow your client to sit with themselves as a client in the same space without making assumptions that anything's personal or they're not comfortable or something needs to be changed or fixed because nobody's broken.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can move forward to the next one, shall we?
Yes.
We shall.
Number 6, partners with the client to identify or reconfirm what they want to accomplish in the session. So contrast that with number 4, where we talked about overarching plans and goals. Now we're talking about particular goals within the session. You first identify it, and then throughout the session, if things sort of deviate, maybe
Rabbit
reconfirm
hole.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the rabbit hole. Hey, it's okay. We can continue down this route, but as a reminder, we have 20 minutes left. Would you like to, and it's kind of this thought of they have a goal, right? And that's it. It definitely goes back to the last one. We want to be on the same page. So every now and again, that I call it the gentle check-in, right? Where I say in class, let's be real. It's an instant interruption, but because you have the accountability, or it's your responsibility rather, to keep the session on track, then let's make sure that we're not having one of those situations where we get to the end. How did you feel about the session? I don't know. I just felt like I kind of talked through some things. I don't know if I reached a goal. Well, that's okay if we establish, 15 minutes ago, would you rather stay talking about this, or that opening session contract, would you rather focus back on what the initial goal was? So goes back again. A lot of this one, really, core competency 3 is around this open communication.
Mm-hmm.
I really, one thing that I thought, or sorry, Jen, to interrupt. One thing I found really interesting too in this space, which is we talked about this rabbit hole and reconfirming, but we're talking about, I want to bring it to that first piece, that identify piece, because one of the things they said is when a coach isn't performing well in this competency, one of the things they'll notice is that if you have a client that, let's say, they want to lose weight, or well, not even that, they want to stick to a diet plan. Okay, so they want to stick to a plan for a diet, but they can't, and they keep failing, and they keep failing it. And if the coach keeps sticking with this, the client just saying, hey, I want to stick to a diet plan, they're not performing well, because a coach should be helping them to identify what it is that is keeping them from sticking to that diet plan. And that's that coaching the person, not the problem. And I think that that's where this identify piece comes in.
Yeah.
Jen, I interrupted.
So a question in this space is, what do you guys do when you have a session where the client cannot get clear on what they want to accomplish or get out of the session? Do you continue to drive towards that, or do you get consent to more free flow? I mean, what's your technique in that situation?
All of the above.
Just to be quick, so we don't stay too much time on this one, I will probably revisit the overall goal and try to figure out what can you do in this session to, progress the overall goal. And if they don't know, I don't know why we're having a coaching session.
I also know that we have a video on this as well. We absolutely do in our YouTube. So I'll try to dig it up and post it here so you can get a look at that. Also, sometimes the goal then becomes figuring out what the goal is.
Mm-hmm.
That's what your goal for this session is. That it becomes okay, well, we got to identify the next step, and we can start to ask into that. Ask into that, I don't know. Ask into that, I'm unsure, because that's where the answers are, right?
The other thing is that the word goal might not align with them.
Mm-hmm.
It might be, how would you like to feel by the end of this session? Or what changes do you feel you want to be making, if any, during this week to come? So it's not always a goal. It's not the word goal. And, I've often had, most of the time my clients come with something they want to talk about, but they don't necessarily know what that would look like by the end of the session. So it could be a feeling.
And then also I think that's great. They come in with something, and it also be something, it usually ends up being something a little different. And that's where this identify piece And the reconfirm comes in really well, right? Because they can come in with one goal, and as we start to talk it through, it can become something else. And that's when we come into this reconfirm piece. And I think it can be something that kind of works, but we do want to at some point limit how much we keep cycling between identify, confirm, and settle on something, right? But sometimes it can be 5 minutes in, sometimes it can be 20 minutes in, right? Sometimes it could be 30 minutes in. We give a rough outline of timing, but that's not a hard and fast rule. It can vary person to person.
Yeah.
Next one, shall we?
Yes.
Number 7, partners with the client to define what the client believes they need to address or resolve to achieve what they want to accomplish in the session. A little bit of a mouthful there, but essentially, we're talking about how it is you're going to achieve your goal, what needs to happen in between the coaching sessions to get what you want.
So something else I want to point out, that notice there's just slight nuances in these transitions. They're all based on really the overreaching, which we opened up with establishing and maintaining agreements. So if you always keep that in mind on what this area of the 3 points, whatever we're working on, that is the different nuanced and different ways we interact with our clients. Okay, go ahead.
That's it for me.
Oh, that's it for you.
Well, so this one is similar to the last one, because this one is a focus on the session agreement and what needs to be addressed to achieve the session agreement.
Yes. And so but we have to, when we break down, I really suggest watching that session agreement video, because the session agreement is more than one piece, right? It's that, what do we want to work on today? How will we know when we have achieved that? What does that look like? And then what are the other 2 pieces, Lisa? Or me? There's
Tell
2
me
more.
what you just said again, and
It's like a 4-part. I have it. I have it somewhere.
So while you think of that, I want to just say the difference for me between number 6 and number 7 is that number 6, we're identifying what they want to accomplish, and a lot of people, for them that term is the problem. But I think 7 is more about the person. We're helping them define what they believe is needed to be, like we're going into more of their core beliefs, what's important to them, what's not important to them.
So when you hear partnership, that's where I was thinking about when, Brooke, you asked me your question. Sorry. When you think about how we partner with our client, what comes up for us coaches in that statement? What's going on there?
Collaboration.
Tell me more.
Tell me more.
I mean, just partnering with the client to discover what it is they're wanting to address. And if they don't know, facilitating further to find out what's underneath, like Brooke said, that I don't know.
Which I think builds from that communication when we start from the session initially, right? That communication, when we build that space of now we're working together in this partnership, that means now we've clearly defined some things in the beginning. And when that communication, when I do that from the start, they're going to trust me a little bit more. And now I can go back to what I said in the beginning. So I think that comes from that clear communication. That's partnership. It's, they're in charge, they're leading the way, but we're finding the spaces together and we're getting to a common ground.
Right. And it also doesn't mean we're agreeing or disagreeing. We're partnering with them. We're kind of on the same wavelength, but it's their experience. We're not here to deny it. We're not here to elaborate. We're here to support them in their experience without judgment.
And being curious.
Absolutely.
And interested.
Yeah.
Instead of interesting. Yeah.
Not interesting.
Okay. I have figured out that the 4 parts are, just so you know, my brain. So the biggest 2 that we teach in ACC and that one-on-one training is what we just spoke of. What is the goal of the session? How will we know when we've achieved our goal? But there's 2 more pieces to that. And this is why does that achieving this goal matter? That emotional relevance and tapping into that. And then the 4th piece is what needs to be addressed, or who do you need to be to accomplish this goal? So essentially that's coming back to that, okay, how are we going to do this? A little bit more of that piece, but also on a level, that person level, that personal level. goal, less about what we talk about the goal, but then we're bringing it into that emotional relevance and then to what's going on inside them that they need. Who do they have to be in order to achieve this, essentially.
Yeah.
So those pieces are more, this is one of those flexing into PCC spaces, right? But still important to know. So we won't live there, but just wanted to bring it up quickly.
Let's
Number
move
8.
on to number 8.
Yeah.
Partners with the client to define or reconfirm measures of success for what the client wants to accomplish.
That's number 9.
Sorry.
Yeah. It looks almost the same, but it's reconfirm measures of success for what the client wants to accomplish in the coaching engagement or individual session. So how are we going to know you've even accomplished your goals? That's what it means to be.
Wait, that's still the one showing on the screen is number 7.
That's number 7. So partners define, reconfirm.
And
we find it.
And while Brooke is pulling it up, I think that's kind of linked back to that one where we talk about the rabbit hole. Like it's that clear path, almost a GPS following it here when you notice that it's getting off track, just to check in to see. And that's part of that reconfirming, right? Where are you now, as opposed to, and every now and again, just really leaning into your client. How are you feeling just as a pit stop? How are you feeling now as compared to when we first started the session around that session goal? So I think that's more just really staying on track with where the client is as we move through this process.
When it comes to the client and their definitions too, what does success mean to them? We can't really reconfirm measures of success until we know what success means for them.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the M part of the SMART goals, is measurable. Let's skedaddle on over to the number 9. Partners with the client to manage the time and focus of the session.
We out of time. See you next week.
Yeah.
Well, I will say from my own experience, I prefer to hear, so we have about 10 minutes left, because I have been caught in coaching sessions and in therapy sessions with someone saying, okay, we got like 2 minutes. See ya. Have a good day. I'm like, right. Well,
yeah, that's tough, right? It's like, whoa, wait a minute. And that's why that last one, right? Reaffirm it and just that gentle check-in of, hey, we're about halfway through the session. How are you feeling? That helps smooth it over when you do run out of time. Yeah. So I think it still goes back to this part of really communicate with your client in this journey, because that's abrupt. If you, even in a conversation, when you're talking to somebody, oh, I got to go. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. That hurts. So I think it's that clear communication.
That one of those things where we want to establish it early on, so you can be something. Just so you know, want to let you know in our sessions, I'm gonna mind our time, so we're not gonna respect your time. And it's something I'll say at the beginning of a meeting. I want to respect everybody's time here, so we're gonna move quickly through this each piece. And it's just my sort of way of saying in a meeting situation that hey, if we have to redivert or come back to things, everybody's gonna be on the same page to table that and do so. There are other ways to do that in a coaching session, of course, but those gentle reminders are very important. It might be one of those things where we discuss what works for you as the client. For you as the client, I do it, or you as the coach, I'm going to remind you probably about 10 minutes before the session's over. I'm going to, and just sort of maybe letting them know ahead of time to expect that we're going to bring it back to that time. I was a coach that let things run long for a while, and I learned that I cannot do that anymore, right? And I changed my whole process for that, because otherwise I learned clients and I could be in a room for, an hour and a half and have only paid for an hour. And that's not what we want. So
I like Steve's comment, the 25 plus minutes Italian goodbye. Yeah, it was the French style too.
Another way of doing that, though, too, is recognizing who your client is. If they're someone who needs more time to unpack whatever it is as you're coming to that closure, then you, of course, buffer that time. Instead of 10 minutes, you might give them 15 minutes if they're that Italian goodbyer, as Steve said there. Or perhaps you have a client that has less words to say, then you can, shortchange it to a shorter time frame.
There's also another piece of this, which I don't think we touched on as much, is the focus of the session.
I was just going to say that.
And as you lose the focus of the session, you also lose the time. And That's why sessions take longer than expected, because the focus isn't there, which is the entire reason why the session contract exists, because from the beginning of the session, you and the client partner to set that focus. And whenever you start to rabbit hole, we already had that conversation, then you can maybe reassess the focus, decide, do you guys want to move in another direction, or should we get back on track to the topic at hand?
Well, and I want to just add to that, and I know we can go on to the next one, but just from the beginning, we talked about having a coaching agreement. In the coaching agreement and in your intake session, it's also very good and helpful to state, part of my role as a coach is to keep us focused. And I will ask you for consent if I feel like we're not, if we're straying. I'm going to say, hey, this is what I'm hearing you say, and are you wanting to be here, or do you want to go back to what you were talking about in order to reach your goal by the end? Either way, I'm here for you. But I think it's important to have that in your agreement from the get-go of what your responsibility is as a coach.
All right, let's move on to number 10. Continues coaching in the direction of the client's desired outcome unless the client indicates otherwise. So,
And I think we've kind of covered this a few times. We've been this throughout. Yeah.
It's NATO, not attached to the outcome. NATO, not attached.
Not me, not mine.
Not me, not mine. There you go. Yep.
the coach also doesn't have a desired outcome at all. It's just the client's.
Well, we do want a testimonial, but I'm just
That's
kidding.
true.
Sorry.
And for you to pay for your sessions on time.
Oh yeah, well, before the session for me, Annie.
Ding.
All right, let's
All right.
finish off
Number
more
11.
competency. Number 3 with number 11. Partners with the client to end the coaching relationship in a way that honors the experience.
Before anybody speaks, I just want to say, remember, at some point, all of these coach-client relationships should end,
Yes.
right? We shouldn't be dependent. It should not become a codependent situation. So every coach should be coaching towards an eventual situation where your client can move forward to something else, to their next thing. We're not coaching to trap our clients to be stuck coaching with us for the rest of their lives. Okay. So when we say honors the experience, that can be a very beautiful thing, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean it's ending early. And that's all. You all, now I'm going to be quiet.
Don't
Beautifully
dishonor
said.
it. Mhm.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah. I don't know that there's much more to say on that one.
I will
Awesome.
say,
Ding.
yeah, and don't be afraid to, in any situation, whether it ends well or we're ending because we have to refer out. We can always do so in a way that is respectful and amicable and celebrates whatever has happened within the space.
Oh, thank God you're leaving. You mean like that?
Why?
No.
Maybe celebrate isn't the right word, but respects the space.
And
And
No,
one
it was
another.
the right choice. I just played on it.
Because I've had coaching relationships that ended well and not well in both situations, where I've had the refer out, I've had this isn't the right space, and that can always be a tough conversation. But I think that we've always been able to come to a space where everybody understands, and that's sometimes it's bumpy getting through it, but we get there.